The human will to survive is one of the most powerful forces on Earth. And throughout history, ordinary people have been thrown into absolutely impossible situations and somehow lived to tell the tale. Today, 6 of the most incredible survival stories ever recorded. We have got a teenage girl who fell 2 miles from an exploding plane and walked out of the Amazon, a hiker who amputated his own arm to escape a boulder, and a cook who survived for 3 days, trapped at the very bottom of the ocean. Every one of these is completely true. Let's get into it. On Christmas Eve, 1971, a 17-year-old girl named Julianne Kopska boarded a flight over the Peruvian rainforest with her mother. Partway through the flight, the plane flew straight into a violent thunderstorm. It was struck by lightning, and it broke apart in mid-air. Julianne, still strapped into her seat, was suddenly falling. She fell 2 miles, around 3,000 meters, from the sky, still buckled to her row of seats, which experts believe may have spun like a helicopter and softened the impact. Astonishingly, she survived the fall. She woke up alone on the jungle floor with a broken collarbone, a swollen eye, and deep cuts, but alive. She was the only survivor out of the 92 people on board. Now, deep in the Amazon, with almost no food, she had to save herself. Remembering advice from her father, a biologist, she knew that following water downstream would eventually lead to civilization. So, injured and completely alone, she waded through the jungle for 11 days, surviving on nothing but a single bag of candy she had found in the wreckage. Finally, she stumbled upon a small boat and a shelter, where loggers found her the very next day and brought her to safety. In April of 2003, an experienced outdoorsman named Aaron Ralston went hiking alone through a remote canyon in Utah. He told no one where he was going. As he climbed down through a narrow gap, a massive boulder suddenly shifted and crushed his right hand against the canyon wall, pinning him completely in place. He was utterly trapped, miles from anyone, with no way to call for help. Ralston was stuck there for 5 agonizing days. He carefully rationed his tiny supply of water and food, tried everything he could to move the 800-pound boulder, and slowly began to accept that he was going to die there. He even carved his own name and what he thought would be his death date into the rock. But on the 5th day, dehydrated and desperate, he had a realization. The only way out was to cut off his own arm. Using the torque of his own body weight, he first snapped the 2 bones in his forearm. Then, with a small, dull multi-tool, he spent about an hour amputating his own arm below the elbow. Free at last, he then rappelled down a 60-foot cliff and hiked 7 miles before he was finally found. His incredible story later inspired the movie 127 Hours. In May of 2013, a Nigerian cook named Harrison Okene was working aboard a tugboat off the coast of Africa. In the early hours of the morning, while he was in the bathroom, disaster struck. A massive ocean swell slammed into the boat, and it suddenly capsized and sank, plunging straight to the bottom of the ocean, 100 feet below the surface. As the boat went down, water flooded in, and the other 11 crew members tragically drowned. But Okene managed to scramble into a small toilet and engine area where, by sheer luck, a pocket of air had become trapped. And there he stayed, in total darkness, freezing cold, and up to his chest in water at the very bottom of the sea. He survived like this for around 60 hours, nearly 3 full days, slowly breathing the last of his dwindling oxygen and praying for a miracle. He had long given up hope when he suddenly heard a sound. A team of divers had arrived, but only to recover the bodies. When a diver's hand suddenly appeared out of the darkness, Okene reached out and grabbed it. The divers were absolutely stunned to find a man, somehow still alive, after 3 days trapped underwater. In 1994, an Italian athlete named Mauro Prosperi was competing in the Marathon des Sables, a brutal 6-day race across the Sahara Desert. On the 4th day, while he was running, a powerful sandstorm suddenly swept in. For around 8 hours, Prosperi was completely blinded by the swirling sand. When it finally cleared, he had no idea where he was. He was hopelessly lost, completely alone, in the middle of the largest hot desert on Earth. Following his survival training, he rationed his water, and when it inevitably ran out, he began drinking his own urine just to stay alive. He took shelter from the brutal daytime heat inside an abandoned shrine, where he survived by catching and eating bats, and even snakes. He walked for days on end, covering enormous distances. At one point, he became so hopeless that he very nearly gave up entirely. But somehow, he found the will to keep going. After around 9 days lost in the desert, having wandered over 100 miles off course and even across the border into another country, he was finally found by a nomadic family who brought him to safety. He had lost over 30 pounds, but he was alive. In early 1982, a sailor named Stephen Callahan set off to sail solo across the Atlantic Ocean in a small boat that he had built himself. About a week into the voyage, in the middle of the night, his boat was struck by something large, most likely a whale, and it quickly began to sink. Callahan barely escaped into a tiny inflatable life raft, just 6 feet wide. He managed to grab a few supplies, a little food, some flares, a spear gun, and devices to slowly distill fresh drinking water from the sea. And then, he began to drift. Callahan drifted across the open Atlantic Ocean completely alone for an astonishing 76 days. He survived by spearing fish like mahi-mahi and catching the occasional bird and barnacle. He battled circling sharks, a constantly leaking raft, and crippling despair. He even watched ships pass by in the distance without ever seeing him. Finally, after drifting nearly 2,000 miles, he was spotted by fishermen near the Caribbean, who were drawn to his raft by the flock of birds circling overhead. He had lost 1/3 of his body weight, but after 76 days at sea, he had survived. Our final story holds a world record that has stood for over 80 years. In 1942, during the Second World War, a Chinese sailor named Poon Lim was working aboard a British merchant ship in the Atlantic. One day, the ship was torpedoed by a German submarine, and it sank. Poon Lim managed to grab a life jacket and was thrown into the water, where he eventually found an empty wooden life raft. It was stocked with a small amount of food and water, but Poon Lim knew that it would not last him very long. So he got to work. He turned the spring from his flashlight into a fishing hook, unraveled rope to make a line, and began catching fish. He collected rainwater in a canvas cover. He even caught seabirds, and at one point, reportedly, managed to catch and eat a small shark. Day after day and week after week, he drifted across the ocean, completely alone. He drifted for an incredible 133 days, which is the longest that anyone is known to have ever survived alone on a raft at sea. Finally, near the coast of Brazil, he was rescued by fishermen. He had survived over 4 months lost at sea through nothing but sheer ingenuity and an unbreakable will to live. And there they are. 6 unbelievable stories of human survival against truly impossible odds. A girl who fell from the sky, a man who cut off his own arm, and a sailor who spent over 4 months adrift at sea. These stories are a powerful reminder of just how much the human body and spirit can endure when everything is on the line. If you found these as incredible as I did, then hit that subscribe button for more weird history every week. And tell me down in the comments which of these survivors amazed you the most. I'll see you in the next one.